Welcome to episode 7 of our Beginner Gardening Bootcamp series. In this episode, we're going to talk about light, specifically how much light your plants need to survive and thrive. I'm here to help you start your own thriving home garden. The amount of sunlight an area gets is critical to know when choosing what to plant and where to plant it. Let's get into it. So let's go through some definitions to make sure we're all on the same page. Full sun means your plant will receive at least 6 hours of direct sun per day. Full shade means your plant will receive no direct sun, only indirect light. And partial sun or partial shade means that the plant will receive between 3 and 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. There's also one other definition you should know, which is morning sun versus afternoon sun. Morning sun is exactly what it sounds like, areas that receive direct sunlight in the morning but are shaded in the afternoon. This usually happens when there is a large object nearby that casts a shadow over the area in the afternoon, such as a large tree. Afternoon sun is the opposite, receiving direct sunlight in the afternoon and remains in shade during the morning hours. These light patterns can be really helpful to know when choosing what to plant. For example, morning sun is great for plants that don't like to get too hot, while afternoon sun is great for plants that need lots of heat. More on that later. To illustrate how much sunlight these terms actually mean, I used a simple trick to see how much sun hits my yard throughout the day. All I did was take 2 sticks and stuck them in the ground. Then every hour from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., I measured the length of the shadow they cast. If you want to do this yourself, you can use anything to mark your spot and measure your shadows. Just make sure it's something long enough to create a noticeable shadow. And remember, the shorter the shadow, the more direct sunlight the area receives. You can even use a tape measure to record the exact length of the shadow, which makes it easier to compare from hour to hour. You can see from my recordings that the spot I tested receives full sun with around 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight per day. But your yard may look very different than mine. The amount of sunlight an area receives depends on the time of year, the direction your yard faces, if there are trees or buildings nearby, and how tall those things are. So be sure to observe your yard for at least a week before making any decisions about what to plant where. Also, remember that the intensity of the sunlight changes throughout the day. Usually, the hottest time of the day is between 2 and 4 p.m., when the sun is highest in the sky. Keep this in mind because some plants will burn and die in intense afternoon sun, while others will actually love it. Now that you know how to measure your light, let's talk about how much light different types of plants need to thrive. First, let's start with the shade-loving plants. Shade-loving plants have adapted to low light conditions and therefore won't tolerate full sun very well. They'll often end up wilting, burning, and even dying. Hostas are a classic shade-loving perennial that does well in partial shade to full shade. Their foliage can range in color from green to blue to gold and variegated, and they're perfect for adding pops of color to shady areas. Another shade-loving annual is impatiens. Impatiens come in a variety of colors including pink, purple, orange, red, white, and yellow. They produce an abundance of blooms from spring to fall and do best in areas that receive bright, indirect light. For example, under the canopy of a large tree. If you live in a hot climate, you might find that your shade-loving plants end up burning in the intense light that filters through your tree's leaves. If this happens to you, try planting a shade-tolerant tree such as an oak tree. Oak trees have smaller leaves than many other trees, which allow more light to filter through their canopy. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we have sun-loving plants. Sun-loving plants need at least 6 hours of direct sun per day to thrive. Too little sun, and they'll end up wilting, becoming leggy and producing few to no flowers. Tomatoes are a classic sun-loving vegetable that needs plenty of direct sun to produce lots of fruit. Most tomato varieties need at least 8 hours of direct sun per day. Other sun-loving vegetables include peppers, eggplants, and melons. Not all sun-loving plants are vegetables, though. Consider adding some coneflowers to your garden for beautiful blooms all summer long. Coneflowers prefer full sun and are a great way to attract pollinators like bees and butterflies to your garden. If you live in a cooler climate, you may notice that your plants end up wilting or becoming leggy in an effort to reach for the sun. This can be remedied by placing your plants in an area that receives more direct sunlight or by pruning off any excess growth. Those of you who live in hotter climates may notice the opposite problem. Your plants may become burned or wilted from the intense afternoon sun. If this is the case for you, try moving your plants to an area that receives morning sun only or afternoon shade. Or add some shade cloth during the hottest hours of the day. If you're lucky enough to have a balcony, you might think that all you can grow is herbs and veggies, since most flowering plants need direct sunlight. But there are plenty of flowering plants that will tolerate shade, such as begonias and fuchsias. Try planting a few on your balcony to add some color to your space. If you live in a hotter climate and your balcony receives intense afternoon sun, consider adding shade cloth to protect your plants. Or better yet, install a retractable awning for a more elegant solution. Not only will this protect your plants, but it will also protect you from the sun while you enjoy your morning coffee or evening glass of wine. If you have a backyard that receives mostly afternoon sun, but you still want to grow some sun-loving plants, consider installing a greenhouse. This will give your plants the extra sunlight they need to thrive, while also protecting them from pests and harsh weather conditions. Now, let's talk about plants that can tolerate both sun and shade. These plants are called facultative shade or sun plants. They're incredibly versatile and can adapt to the amount of sunlight an area receives. This makes them perfect for areas that receive fluctuating amounts of sun throughout the year, or for gardeners who aren't quite sure how much sun different areas of their yard receive. A few examples of shade or sun plants include columbine, coral bells, aster, yarrow, and bee balm. So now that you know the difference between shade, partial, and full sun, and you have a good idea of how much sunlight different areas of your yard receive, it's time to put your plants in the right place. Consider the amount of sun an area receives, the type of plant you want to grow, and the characteristics of your yard when deciding where to plant. For example, if you have a hot, dry area that receives full sun all day, it's probably not the best spot for a shade-loving annual like impatiens. Instead, try planting a drought-tolerant perennial like coneflower or yarrow. Or, if you have a cool, moist area that receives partial shade, don't bother planting vegetables like tomatoes or peppers. They'll grow, but they likely won't produce fruit. Instead, try planting a shade-loving perennial like hosta or ferns. It can sometimes be tricky to know what plants will grow well in your yard, based on the amount of sunlight it receives. Luckily, there's an easy solution. If you want to guarantee success, simply ask your local nursery for plants that are well suited for your yard. They'll be able to recommend plants that will thrive in the amount of sunlight your yard receives. Plus, they'll be able to recommend plants that are well suited for your hardiness zone. One final note about sun and light. Remember that the amount of sunlight an area receives changes throughout the year. In the winter months, the sun's rays hit the earth at a lower angle, meaning that areas that receive full sun in the summer may only receive partial sun in the winter. So keep this in mind when planning your garden beds. Choose plants that will grow well in the conditions your garden will experience during its hottest, sunniest time of year. If you found this information helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more helpful gardening videos. Until next time, happy gardening!